again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We have got a very spicy one. I can't wait to read these message boards. Let's do it. Anybody with friends or family members who fell into the QAnon conspiracy theories and stories, what are some of the crazier things that you've heard them say? Please remember to like, share, read those comments. Guy at work got fired for being dumb, but didn't get another job because the Great Reset and poll reversal were coming. Plus, believed Trump was going to tear down the evil liberal institutions, so no sense getting in the way when the Patriots take our country back. So, he partied through his savings, and then, when he ran out of money, he left his phone behind so Hillary's hit squad wouldn't be able to track him. Was heading to the West Coast, 2,000 kilometers away, to live in the woods until it all died down. He ran out of money and gas 150 kilometers down the road and had his family looking for him, as well as a police bulletin circulated everywhere. His house and acreage got repossessed. His best bud at work was taking bets that Trump would win, even after the results were announced. Bonus effery? This is all well inside Canada. Trump is a foreign politician. So dumb. My uncle used to be cool, pretty funny, chill to be around. Anyway, last time I went to visit, he started ranting about how overpaid teachers were. Me, my husband, and my mom, his sister, are all teachers. Then he started going on about how weird furries are, and how he read schools and liberal districts are going to accommodate furries by letting them use a litter box instead of bathrooms. We all thought he was joking until we realized he honestly believed schools were going to let kids shit in litter boxes. Someone I know, who will remain unnamed, said the whole crisis with the ship that got stuck in the canal, the Evergreen, remember that? Well, that accident was a plan by the resistance against the deep global government. On the ship was a machine that took 20 years to develop, meant to control the weather, and further targeted climate change as a means of geopolitical manipulation and control. The agents successfully destroyed it, an absolute victory, I was told. It can't be rebuilt. This was all said to me with a completely straight face by a person with a graduate level education in STEM. I honestly had no words and still don't. I mean, come on, man. Everybody knows that weather machine's already up in space. Come on. Duh. Mother-in-law went downhill as soon as the vid hit. Refused to leave the house. Orders tons of Trump gold coins and silver and gold bars because the economy was going to collapse. Believe that the elites are torturing children and drinking their blood to stay young, and many, many other bizarre theories. She wouldn't get the jab. Wouldn't go to see the doctor when things were bothering her because she didn't want him to force her interpretation of him putting pressure on her to get it. Wouldn't go get blood drawn because she couldn't handle wearing a mask, claustrophobic and agoraphobic. Anyways, when she started to bleed out of her nether regions and couldn't keep herself from falling out of bed and couldn't get back up, she finally relented and got someone to take her to the clinic. They sent her to the hospital, and 2 months later she was gone. She had been suffering from bladder cancer for nearly 2 years and just thought she was having gallbladder issues. Super infuriating and frustrating beyond belief because it didn't have to kill her. They could have detected it much sooner, and they could have removed her bladder, and she could have lived. My mother-in-law is absolutely convinced there's a video on the dark web of Hillary Clinton cutting a 10-year-old's face off and wearing it. She also goes on and on about all the people that went to Epstein's place. But if you mention Trump did, she gets defensive and goes, "No, he didn't. Show me proof." And when you say, "Okay, show proof Will Smith went there," she says, "Oh, it's coming out." Pretty annoying to deal with and has caused my husband and I to distance ourselves. Edit. Just want to say, I love my mother-in-law. We have a decent relationship, but she discovered TikTok, and it's been downhill ever since. LOL. I have a dear friend whose mother believes very firmly that there is an opposite Earth named Nibiru that orbits the Earth exact orbit, but always completely across the orbit from us, so always hidden by the sun. Furthermore, she also believes that this counter-Earth's orbit is going to destabilize somehow. There is no explanation given as to why this will happen, or why it's going to happen now, except God is punishing sinners, and that the government is covering this up because it's going to cause earthquakes and volcanoes and tidal forces that will destroy all of California and only California because we're liberal sinners. Yes, only California. Yes, even the children and babies. Yes, she's also alarmingly anti-abortion. No, there's no explanation for how every single NASA employee would be forced to hide this information. There's also no explanation for how any other country's space agencies would be forced to hide this information. My uncle told me that I wouldn't believe the huge number of children that are kidnapped by pedophiles in our town. For reference, this is a town of under 5,000 people in rural America. Everyone knows each other. No children have been taken or gone missing. I asked him how many children he believes are kidnapped in our city each year, and he said he believes at least a dozen. He believes that Donald Trump is somehow involved with uncovering and fighting the child kidnapping ring. He's a mechanical engineer, so not generally a dumb fellow. He should have better logic than to think dozens of kids were kidnapped and sex trafficked from our town park, but when it comes to the Q stuff, logic is totally out the window. I know a few. Here's what gets me and what is just so disturbing about it. There are no some cracked out crazy person cause that does exist, but they are everyday people. I could show you pictures of my sister and her husband with their new baby, and they look like a happy albeit conservative family. Everything they do is normal. But they look at me in disgust and ask why I would vote for a party that drinks the blood of babies and worships Satan. One family member was pleading and crying in hysteria because they were concerned I was being corrupted by the devil, and before I knew it, I would be fooled into sacrificing my children and doomed into an everlasting hellfire. I'm just trying to get healthcare and better social safety nets. Like, we all don't seem to understand the US is clearly going to break apart. Like this is happening either very quickly or very slowly, but it's happening. This shit is driving people, and I cannot emphasize more how I'm trying to cherish the best of the times now in abject normalcy before it goes to shit. Because a lot of people will flat out die for this bullshit, and they will be happy to. They're lost, and I have no idea how it'll get any better. My father found a doctor that agrees with his political views. Doctor took him off his bipolar meds. In the last 15-ish years, he threw away a $125,000 a year job in his early 50s and got divorced on the cusp of his 30-year anniversary. The papers arrived to my mother December 23rd. My sister answered the door. He was also sort of fringe, but it was under control. Typical ex-hippie. Now everything is about chemtrails, Jesus, liberals, Democrats, pizza shops, and all the other keywords. Most of his 4 brothers have written him off. I don't talk to him anymore. He found out that Tolkien found religion after serving in World War I, and his stance on Lord of the Rings as Satanism quickly changed, and he started buying me all these books about Tolkien and Christianity he heard about on the local K-Love Christian rock station. My sister struggles with it more. I am the oldest, she was the favorite. I've been low-key used to not having a father for a lot longer than her. Best is, he almost killed himself Christmas Day. He stopped eating to lose weight, aforementioned doctor's advice, and he wanted to slim down for her, his daughter's wedding. When his brother went over to check on him, after interrupting his own festivities with his kids and grandkids, mind you, my father fell out of bed. He stayed in the hospital for the entire week, and they didn't even know what was wrong. Found out he starved himself and went into organ failure. I told him he was pretty lucky it was Christmas Day, because if it was any other Saturday, people would have assumed you were just sick, and no one would have come to check on you. He got really upset and finally decided to get the vaccine. I don't think he ever did. He's completely lost. His parents are 90, and they don't know what to do. He isolates himself and then lashes out like a cornered animal. He gets worse every year. He is a German immigrant who never got his citizenship, who is overly concerned with politics and identifies as American, which is hilarious because he isn't the most progressive person when it comes to identities. I don't want to see anyone suffer for their beliefs or anything like that. It's complicated, you know? Maybe some things are right, but mixed into a big bad pile of silliness. What do you guys think? A somewhat distant relative was the preacher at a church, his own church that he started and grew from the ground up. A few hundred people in his congregation, normal services, no extremism, just the church. He and the rest of the family was so proud of the church. They volunteered, they donated, they were a family. Then COVID. He preached to his congregation about the dangers of wearing masks, that masks are a sign of the world, that You don't trust God to keep his followers safe. Wearing masks might as well be that one disciple who denied Jesus. We know him. Followers who don't wear a mask can use that as conversion starter to bring people to salvation. When someone asks why you aren't wearing a mask, you tell them you have no fear that your faith will see you through, and ask if they've heard of Jesus. COVID broke out among the congregation, but virtual services would be a sign they didn't believe in God's plan. The sick were encouraged to attend services to receive healing. It continued to spread. The preacher, my relative, got sick, ended up in the hospital. His brother, who caught COVID from the preacher, ended up in a different hospital. The brother is on ventilator. Preacher is getting worse. He confesses to his sisters that he made a mistake. Someone needs to tell the church. This is serious stuff. He lost his way and listened to politicians instead of the word. He wants the people to know he was wrong and need to protect themselves and their families. The sisters promise him they'll tell the church. His sisters secretly agree not to tell the church. They don't want to ruin his reputation by admitting he was wrong. What they don't connect the dots for is God was going to save all the good Christians and the preacher died. That's a worse reputation than admitting he was wrong, in my opinion. His brother dies. He couldn't say goodbye because neither could leave the hospital, and phone calls are hard when you're ventilated and also unconscious, more than you're awake. A stranger spoke at his brother's funeral. Preacher had presided over all of our family funerals for over a decade. People always spoke on how well he did. A stranger spoke for his brother. Preacher died shortly after, leaving the family to wonder who preaches at the preacher's funeral. And I can't gloat. I can't take joy in his death. I can't feel schadenfreude that his decisions brought this on himself. He was a nice man who would help anyone he came across regardless of race, gender, orientation, religion, and politics, and he drank the Kool-Aid. His kids lost their uncle and their father less than a week apart, and it didn't have to happen that way. When the big freeze happened in San Antonio, I think it was 2021, my mom was very nonchalant about it because she knew the power would go out. Granted, I feel like everyone had a feeling just because of the weather, but she had been saying Biden was going to shut off the power for weeks, and he had planned it to be during the bad weather. Where she got this, I truly don't know. She's in a Christian cult now and thinks she's a prophet, so her thinking Biden turned off our electricity doesn't surprise me anymore. At a time in my life, my relationship with my mom and dad went down the toilet. I was an adult at the time, but really missed conversations with my father. I had started a new gig working with this old fella. We will call him Don. Don was an old rock and roll guy, but missed the Pink Floyd boat. I quickly got him up to speed, and that turned him into a great friendship, and Don filled in some of the shoes for those father-son conversations. Don and I would meet up at local shows and got along with my wife really well also. It was nice. Don got sucked into the Q really hard and started talking about rando shit that I knew nothing about. I had moved on in my career path at this point, so communication was less anyhow. But then this shit, he was sending me links from some duck thing that I never clicked on, but ended up having to tell him that I loved him, and I hoped that it all worked out for him on the long run. But if he did not want to talk about anything else or open up to hear different thoughts on the subject, that I was going to have to sever the friendship we had created over these years. He chose Q. So basically, I lost my surrogate dad to all of this shit. What can you do? People have the right to believe what they want, and I respect that. However, the shit he was trying to talk to me about was insane. Well, if your surrogate father became insufferable because of his beliefs, then you did what you felt was right. And if you thought that was worth severing that bond and relationship, then that's your choice. And hopefully everything works out well for you and for everyone. Saw a friend of a friend go from the most esteemed and talented architect in my region, a real intellectual, to a paranoid conspiratorial moron who believed that COVID vaccines made you vulnerable to 5G's mind control waves and that the government all around the globe had been taken over by aliens from Alpha Centauri, who hid the truth about the supernatural powers of the human mind and who needed a constant supply of abortions to feed upon human stem cells, all in about 5 years, because he reconnected with this guy from his high school who opened his eyes about the Holocaust. Back then, I refused to go into details on that. His son was one of the smartest people I'd ever known, an incredibly talented artist, a perfect student, cultured in literature, philosophy, and movies, as if he wrote them. And then he followed his parents into that conspiratory bullshit like they were the sole repository of universal truth. He swore off philosophy, calling it opium for the masses. He stopped reading altogether, as the only read from his trusted sources. He even stopped watching films, as he says they contain subliminal messages. Devoid of most inspiration, he finally stopped making art. He went from selling art commissions for thousands to making most of his money writing clickbait articles for online journals. I truly believe the world lost something really precious with those two.